do you think Minecraft's original continent-based generation was just superior to what we have nowadays? Well, I think so too, because it just had way more adventure, way more intrigue, and also it's just way better for, you know, multiplayer servers, which the whole mod pack is built around that concept. So if you look behind me, we have continents, and we tweaked them a lot. Let's get into it. So we have two main types of land masses. Islands, which are rather large but not that large, and continents, like that one in the background, which is really large. And if I hop into Panoptic and go into our seed inspector and zoom out, I can actually show you how the world gen looks, because it's not just about the continents. As you can see, these continents are rather large, and even at the closest parts they are still about 2,000 blocks away from each other, with some exceptions, but having some continents close by is actually pretty cool, I think. And again, we have two main types of landmass. We have these islands, like a little starter island. This, by the way, is most likely going to be our next test server's starting seed. There's also another island like right here. And we have these bigger continents. Some of them are smaller, some of them are bigger, some of them are conjoined and thus become way bigger, that kind of stuff. But as you can see, the biomes only seem to be changing at extreme distances. Like, for example, you can't really find any colder biomes until 12,000 blocks to the west. And if you want to go to the actual cold biomes, it's 20,000 blocks to the west. Well, that is intentional, because our biome sizes are ginormous. This is to encourage trade and just the use of aeronautics. I might talk about aeronautics on the Saturday video, so stay tuned for that. But the long and short of it is that, of course, we have stuff like airplanes. And we tested it with my current Iron Age airplane design, which is using an Iron Age steam engine, getting to the jungles over here, which is about 26,000 blocks away, with landing twice, because I might have had a broken airplane, and I might have tried to land and then slightly crash landed. I'll talk about that in a second as well. This took about 10 minutes only, which is not a lot of time to travel 25,000 blocks. So it kind of encourages skillful aeronautics building. We also have stuff like small ships, and of course, just, you know, create trains. But building a full-on railway across this distance with no infinite resources, it's gonna cost you a lot. And you're not gonna do it that early. Although it will definitely be a very cool part of the server eventually, when people have the resources. Which might not really happen on the test servers, but there's not a lot to test about that, is there? Trains also require fuel, and of course all of the planes require fuel. We don't have the survival engine, so it's like steam engines and then, you know, higher tech ones like actual fueled engines and electric motors and stuff like that. And of course, to add to this whole you need aeronautics, but you need to be good at aeronautics thing, we have collision damage for aeronautics, which I'll get into detail on in the next video. But again, what matters for us right now is that if you crash land your plane, well, you might be stuck. And of course, if you know how to repair your plane, that's a big bonus, but doesn't necessarily mean that you can if you don't have a big enough plane that has crafting stuff on it. So it all requires meticulous preparation to travel. Again, the jungle on this seed is 26,000 blocks away, 20,000 for the cold, and I think the closest desert is 74,000 blocks away. And yes, these are meant to be the threads I was saying before, because they're meant to be exploited by some players. You know, just move near a desert, or into it if you're that kind of freaky, and use it to plant some crops. Because guess what? Stuff like cacti, well, they can only grow in badlands, savanna, and deserts. And if I hold shift, it actually tells me all of the biomes. Yes, I finally implemented this to our little restriction mod. It only made me slightly go insane. But more importantly, although cactus is pretty important, you know, I think one thing that a lot of players will definitely be wanting is these coatings, or coats, I guess. So the common versions of these will give you +2 to heat or cold resistance, and they need either sun ferns, the golden versions, which are rare, or ice ferns, which weirdly look very similar to the sun ferns, but they're not actually the same. I might have thought that they were the same and I was a bit confused there for a second, but they're not the same. These are ice ferns and these are sun ferns. And if we look at the seeds, they are heavily restricted to only grow in tigers, snowy tigers, old growth pine tigers, old growth spruces, and for sun ferns to only grow in deserts, Atacama outbacks, Mojave deserts, and windswept deserts. Hope I'm saying that right. Which means that if you want to capitalize on the fact that people will want heat and cold coats, which by the way, even a best versions of these codes still require ferns, of course. You will have to go out and travel possibly 70,000 blocks, which is again a very good thing if you want to play on an economy-based, PvP-enabled, kind of faction-y server, like our concept is, basically. But enough talk about that. I might make a full video about just, talking about how we are trying to, I suppose, stimulate the economy in the game. Let's take a closer look at the smaller islands and then at the bigger ones as well. Well, the continent, I suppose. So this is going to be most likely our starter island. As you can see, there are a lot of dungeons, but they're not that common. Ignore that tower, that is the only thing on this map that is not going to be in the final version. These towers are a bit too early for a modpack, I feel like. And they kind of just generate all over the place, which is also not that good. But these ships, for example, are gonna be there. So in terms of dungeon gen, you will always have some stuff to do. And we'll get to that over there with that dungeon. But first, let's just talk about the land itself. So of course, there's lots of rivers just going through the actual islands, which is a very good thing, because of course, if you want to get the highest speed water wheels, you need to move next to a river. Plus, we don't have infinite water, which means that you either want to move next to the ocean or to rivers to get your water out of. Another thing that you might notice is that these mountains are not that tall. This one, for example, is only about 150 blocks. That one maybe around 200, which these aren't the actual mountain heights that we have. We have way higher mountains than this, but not on islands, which is actually pretty interesting because it opens up some new possibilities and kind of changes the gameplay when you're on an island compared to a continent, which have mountains that go up to almost 300 blocks. These are also way easier to fly over with airplanes, especially lower power airplanes, while continent's mountains like that, which can be again around like 300 blocks high, that might cause some issues for earlier engines. But as you can see, these tiny mountain ranges are still generated, which, especially for, starting off, it's actually going to act as a pretty nice little natural barrier between players. We will have some ways to stop people from, just stealing your items, but they're all compatible with PvP. Right now, for a while, we are going to be using OPAC with an add-on. I think it's called OPAC Warfare, which just basically lets people raid your claim, but they need to initiate it and you will be notified. That is not the final version. We're actually using the Recruits mod for that, because I think the Recruits mod is just way cooler for this, plus we're using it anyways, but the Recruits mod is not on 1.21.1 yet. So for now, we are just going to be using OPAC at the start of the next server. But in the final game, it's going to be Recruits, and how Recruits' as raiding system works is you need X amount of units on somebody's claim for Y amount of minutes. If I remember correctly, we were experimenting with 15 units for 15 minutes or an hour. I'm not remembering the exact numbers right there, but something along those lines. But these are just very experimental and we might change them eventually. But yeah, these natural barriers would definitely act, well, as a natural barrier from other players. I mean, of course, they can just swim around, but, you basically have a C-shaped wall right here. If you want to claim this area for yourself or the starting continent, it's going to be pretty handy. And most of us are planning to stay on the starting continent for a while on the next test server, and that's most likely going to be our strategy for the final servers as well, because the entire concept for the modpack is trading, and from experience on the last modpack, we had a couple issues when we moved 30,000 blocks away from other players, because even though we had stuff to trade, we didn't have the means to actually trade it with other players. We didn't have any transport, and again, we were like 30,000 blocks away from spawn, so building a railway would have taken us a long time. So what I recommend is just don't move out for a while if you trust other players, or don't move that far away. And when you have the means to, transport back to spawn, that's the time to move out. And my plan is exactly that. Stay in the little spawn regions, not exactly sure where I'll do this will be. Again, this will be your starting island, but I really haven't thought about it too much yet, and just move out when it's time. Yeah, there's these little pockets of relatively safer areas which are pretty good to occupy, even if you're living around other players. And again, we are meant to facilitate that into a modpack. We want people to live around each other. Well, maybe not live around each other, but to have some, let's call it outposts around each other. Like a trading outpost or a little workshop where, you can just use depositors to make the machines work. These things basically just take coins and you can do some stuff with them. It just releases a redstone signal, so basically you can do anything with them. And there's plenty of these, again, these little shielded areas that nicely separate the player base. And since even the farthest continents are only 2,000 blocks away, basically, in most areas, if you don't move a couple continents away, just like one, well, making the trip back and forth, even with just a small ship, or just a very early on aeronautics ship, it's not gonna take you a lot of time. In fact, it's gonna take you maybe 5 to 10 minutes at max at the slowest, with the slowest vehicles. And yes, there's plenty of space, lots of trees, of course, there's different biomes, like currently we're in an orchard, of course, which is, you know, a very good biome if you want to specialize in some early cooking, because you can get some apples, a lot of them. But if you want to build more, then you would go back to around there, to this, I think the biome is called Forgotten Woods or something along those lines, which just has a lot of trees. But of course, there's also downsides to these, because if you have a lot of trees, well, you gotta clear them. If you have apples in your area and you want to claim the entire thing, well, you might be contested in that, because people might not like that exactly. And as you can see, you have some open areas with just a lot of gravel, some small islands that are, you know, parts of the actual big island, and also, of course, the dungeons, which, again, the dungeon progression will need its own video, but these are from Dungeons Rise. And these are pretty early on in terms of progression, so you can kind of just, you know, go up to them, and if you have the means, you can get some pretty cool loot, which you can either keep for yourself or trade with other players. Loot is completely tweaked, and you might want some of it for yourself. Again, you might want to trade it. There is armor here, weapons here, there can also be resources in here, but of course you will have to fight these guys to get here. Now, in terms of these big continents, as you can see, the scale of everything is just way bigger. For example, and I don't think this is one of the tallest mountains here, is already 220 blocks. 230 if you include the tree, which of course you will have to include that because you don't want to crash into that. Which, depending on your playstyle of course, you might want to live in a place like this, where it's just a gigantic piece of land that you could really not claim by yourself, or you might want to go to a smaller island like that, which, I've talked about this before, but we had a 1.12 version of this server that ran for around a year and a half, and on that server we didn't have these gigantic continents. This looks absolutely awesome. With the natural barriers, this is so cool. Just look at how cool this is. This would be a nice place to make a base. But returning to what I was saying, on that server, we had continents around that size, maybe a bit larger. And it was a pretty cool idea to just, you know, make the entire continent your base, eventually. Because of course it's still a gigantic continent, island thing. It's way more feasible to make into your base than something like this, of course. Although not impossible, but good luck. And there's a lot more caveats I could talk about, a lot more cool little features, but I feel like those are all going to get their own videos. So I hope you enjoyed this, and if you have any questions about the generation or just anything else I mentioned, because I kind of went on a lot of tangents here, feel free to let me know down in the comments, of course.